Hey everybody, welcome to Crazy Tech Lab, and we have a suitably crazy bit of hardware in the lab today. In fact, this thing is quite possibly the most insane all-in-one liquid cooler that I have ever tested, and I've been testing these things for around 2 decades. I know what I'm talking about, and I've reviewed probably hundreds of them, and this is without doubt probably in the top 3 craziest liquid coolers that I have ever tested. It is the HYTE THICC Q60, and it is thick in every single sense of the word. It has the thickest radiator that I've ever seen on an all-in-one liquid cooler. It has the thickest fans that I've ever seen included with an all-in-one liquid cooler as well. And the price is equally thick at $300. That is a lot of money to spend on a liquid cooler, especially just a 240mm liquid cooler as well. You can obviously get much larger liquid coolers or much larger radiators on liquid coolers for a lot less money. You could probably buy a custom liquid loop, albeit a fairly basic one, for the same price. So there are other things that you get with this cooler other than a very large radiator and potentially epic cooling performance. You get a gorgeous high resolution screen that sits on top of your processor. I would say pump section, but that's not where the pumps are actually located. They're located in the radiator, and there are 2 of them. And this thing is just crazy all round. There's a lot of stuff that we need to get through today. We're going to be comparing it against a standard 240mm all-in-one liquid cooler to see how it performs against that. We're going to be comparing it against a high-end liquid cooler as well with a much larger radiator than this thing to see how it performs. So lots of things to consider. As I say, we're going to be building a PC to see how it looks because we need to check out that high resolution screen and how the whole HYTE Nexus ecosystem works in terms of fans that you can clip together, LED strips, and how the software works in controlling all of that lot. Fully software controlled as well, this thing, so if you want to customize your fan curves and control the fan and pumps to suit your noise levels, all of that is included with this cooler. And I know that the software has been a sticking point for other liquid coolers out there, so it's going to be quite interesting to see how that works and how effective it is and how easy it is to use, of course. So I'd like to thank HYTE for sending this thing over, and also I'd love if you could subscribe to my channel, and if you do, don't forget to turn on those notifications, and also don't forget to like and comment on this video as well. It just helps punch me through the algorithm and gets me noticed. If you found this video informative as well, you can check out the links on how to send me some thanks in the description below, and you can even buy me a coffee in the description below as well. Also, don't forget to check out my Amazon shop where you can pick from all of the best products that I've reviewed and thoroughly tested here on the channel as well. And don't forget, you can check out the buy links for this insane liquid cooler in the description down below as well. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let's crack on with the review. So here we are with the HYTE THICC Q60 then, and we're going to do a quick unboxing to see what we actually get in this rather snazzy looking box. So if we open it up, have to admit I have cheated on you guys a little bit because I have ripped for THICC already. So I've been doing a bit of ripping for THICC on my own, unfortunately, so sorry about that, guys. But I wanted to make sure that the paper wasn't going to interfere with anything when I was doing the video. Something that I do want to mention, though, about the packaging, which is all pretty good, is this little addition here. It's actually a little fragrance capsule over there, and you open this thing up and it just all smells all nice and fresh and yummy. Not had that on many bits of hardware before. So anyway, let's get rid of the packaging here and we can see what we've got in the box. So we've got a pretty decent set of instructions here. I don't think anybody is going to struggle with this. So Intel users, you just have a back plate with a mounting plates on the actual cooling plate, which isn't actually the pump. We'll get to that in a minute. So the bit that actually sits on your processor, the cold plate, that just has these mounting plates mounted on it. Then you've got a back plate for Intel. Similar mounting plates for AMD, but with AMD, as you can see over here somewhere, just going to find it, you do actually need to remove the standard mounting brackets on socket AM5 and socket AM4. So that's really easy to do. Just remove the 4 screws, remove the plastic brackets, and then you just install the thumb screws and away you go. You don't need to remove the backplate on AMD systems. You use the existing backplate. So all pretty interesting and very straightforward. So I'm going to lift this thing out straight away. This is why I opened the box earlier, because every box and every bit of hardware is different, so I just tend to do this off camera first so I can give you guys a quick seamless overview of everything that we're seeing. So Nicely packaged radiator. The protective outer casing means that there are no kind of dented fins. I know that you guys are pretty particular about that, even though they're pretty common with a lot of radiators these days. Now, this is the absolutely enormous 52mm thick radiator, so you can see that's way thicker than your average radiator. And the fans as well, 32mm thick, so they are pretty ginormous as well. So the first thing to notice is that we have a pump embedded in the radiator. Not actually just one pump, there's actually another one around the other side as well. So dual pumps, and the fact that they're mounted in the radiator potentially means that there's a little bit of impact on cooling, because obviously there are fewer fins here, but the pump is mounted directly behind the fan bearing of the fan on the other side, so you're not losing that much cooling potential. But the benefit of mounting the pump in the radiator like this, and it's not the first cooler to do this, is that you don't have any cables running down to the section that actually sits on your water block, which is, that sits on your CPU. So this kind of water block section here doesn't have any cables running to it, which is pretty awesome. Apart from the cables for the screen, which you can see here, so they kind of run up through the tubing, etc. But there's no extra cables for your pump. That's all dealt with through connections on the radiator end, and the pump and fans are software controlled as well, and we'll have a look at all of that in a minute. So another interesting thing is that the radiator is set up out of the box with its fans in pull mode. So these enormous fans are actually drawing air through the radiator rather than pushing it through. So at least that is how I'm reading this, given the grills are on the back. Now, I might be mistaken there, it might be pushing, but I'm pretty sure it's actually pulling air through, and that this isn't just some weird fan design. So kind of interesting to see that. You don't often see that on all-in-one liquid coolers with the radiators or the fans in pull mode. So there isn't really that much difference, to be honest. I mean, there's slightly more static pressure if you're shoving air through a radiator rather than pulling it through it. But it remains to be seen whether they'll be able to outdo your average liquid cooler in this configuration. So hopefully they will. So we'll have to get testing on this very, very soon. So the connectors that we get on this thing, you get basically 3 Type-C USB ports, and all the cables and everything else are included in the box. And kind of like this velcroed protective sleeve for the tubing, because they are braided and they can snag on things. So I would suggest leaving this on as long as you can, because that will mean that the tubing is protected and it won't get snagged on anything. So kind of a nice addition, although it is a bit of a shame that this is basically going to be thrown in the bin. There's quite a bit of waste there, and Velcro isn't the most environmentally friendly material. So we can now have actually no, let's have a look at the screen first, because that's probably why half of you are buying this. We'll look at the accessory box in a minute. So this is the enormous screen. We're going to look at this in a bit more detail later on, but obviously if you want to add a screen to your PC, or you want to go for the HYTE Y70 Touch, the fabulous high-resolution touchscreen case, then you can obviously pair this up with that. We're going to be using the H60 because I haven't used that case yet, and hopefully we're going to get things looking pretty snazzy later on. So this is a very, very high resolution touchscreen, and it's undoubtedly the biggest screen that I have ever used with an all-in-one liquid cooler. This thing is absolutely crazy. So I'm going to put that to one side now and have a quick look at the cold plate here. So we've got a cover because we have some pre-applied thermal paste. Now, I'm kind of in two minds about pre-applied thermal paste, for the simple reason that it's very easy. As you can see here, I've just removed this earlier and I've put it back on. I've already damaged the thermal paste layer. And I've been really careful with this. So if someone isn't aware that this stuff is pre-applied, if you just tear through the instructions and just want to get it mounted as soon as possible, then this could potentially be a bit of a problem. So it's just something to be aware of, that you just need to just be very, very careful with the thermal paste when you're moving around, and keep this thing on as long as you can and try not to press it like I did, because that is the damage that you will do. So we'll see how that goes later, and if we need to apply some more thermal paste or something like that. But there's very, very little damage done there, but you just need to be aware of it. So let's move this whole thing to the side and see what we get in the accessory box. And hopefully everything is all nicely bagged up depending on which socket you're using, and that certainly seems to be the case. So you've got an AMD kit for socket AM5 and AM4, and you have an Intel kit which is compatible with pretty much everything after socket 775, which was ancient now. Goes to show how long I've been doing this stuff. So obviously LGA 1700, 12th, 13th and 14th gen CPUs, LGA 1200, which I think is 10th and 11th gen CPUs, and then going all the way back for 9th gen CPUs and previous models as well. So loads of stuff in there and neatly packaged, so you know which bag to open depending on the socket that you've got. We also have the various Type-C connections here, so you'll need a spare 6-pin power connector to power this thing, some spare USB ports, and there's the dual Type-C connectors as well for the software control. So that is pretty much it. Just got some standard thumb screws and radiator mounting screws. No fan screws included here because we already have the fans attached to the radiator, but you could of course add your own fans to the radiator, and unfortunately that's something that HYTE doesn't include, is an extra set of screws. So we'll be looking at the thick fans in isolation in a future review to see how they perform, and hopefully they might include some radiator screws in there, because otherwise you're a little bit stuck if you want to add any more fans to this radiator. You probably won't, because this thing is already enormous as it is, but we'll see. So that's it for the unboxing. Let's crack on with the review. So here we are with the nearly completed PC. It was super easy getting the radiator in there, but you will obviously need to make sure that you have room for that in other cases, because the Y60 case that we've got here, that we've done a few upgrades to, obviously has a lot of room, and it's great to see that even though this is a slightly older case from the company, that this radiator fits in here absolutely fine. So here we have the gorgeous screen, and as you can see, you can kind of move it from side to side like that. I wouldn't try and mount it so that it's kind of up the other way in landscape mode, because this arm here does tend to drop down. So I started with that mode to see what would happen, and the arm isn't strong enough to actually hold the screen. So you do need it in portrait mode like this. So we've got the CPU temperature on there. We've also got the actual CPU that we've got here, the Core i7-14700K, and you've got the temperature in there as well. Those settings are configurable. There aren't that many screens to actually choose from at the moment, so what we've got here is just kind of the basics. There are more screens and functionality coming. You can obviously pick from a funky background like this. There's plenty of those to choose from as well, and a few other things such as your own media, but it just looks absolutely gorgeous. So other things I wanted to mention are the Nexus ecosystem. So we've got some magnetic clip together or snap-on connectors that connects everything together. So we've got one connector, I think you can just see it over the top there. There's a Type-C connector coming out of the controller on the radiator, and that kind of goes around to connect to this fan that we've added in here. It's one of the new HYTE THICC fans. We've got another one here. Those two just snap together, so there are no cables at all connecting those two fans. We also have another fan in the rear here, and as you can see, there's just a small connector up there, which is basically one of these, snaps on really, really easily, making it super quick and easy to connect all your hardware together. So no RGB lighting on these fans. We do have an LED strip though, a HYTE LED strip that we're going to show you just to how easy it is to connect up components to the Nexus ecosystem. And if you just go down here, snaps on, as easy as that. It's magnetic, and you don't need to fiddle around with anything. I couldn't even see where I was plugging that in there. I just literally let the magnets do their own thing. That's now connected. And we have Type-C connectors. These are exactly the same connectors that you connect to the additional port on the radiator if you want to hook up extra fans or RGB lights like we've got here. And the great thing is you don't need to turn your PC off to do this. So we've got a pink color selected at the moment in the software, and as you can see, a couple of seconds later the LED strip fires up, and you can then place that wherever you want to in your PC case. And if you want to extend that out, there are a couple more LED strips in the box, and you have different connectors. You can connect these to the fan hub controller that's provided with the THICC fans, or you can connect it to the THICC radiator that we've got through there. And just super, super easy to connect all of that stuff up. Now, when it comes to the fans, you can connect the fans to your motherboard by way of a PWM adapter for the radiator, or you can use the software, and it's the software that we're going to look at now. Okay, so here we are with the software then, and we have a few things to go through, including the lighting, the faces, for the screen that is, and also the cooling. We're going to start with the cooling because that's the more involved section, so we're just going to head over and have a look at that now. And as we can see here, we've got the temperature inputs on the left. That's a really important thing to bear in mind. And we've got the curves in the center, and we've got the outputs on the right. So you kind of create your own curves or pick from existing curves, and you can create your own flat curve like I've done now down here. So that's basically just a flat curve at a specific percentage. So for the pumps and fans, that would be a specific RPM. And then you basically assign your components to that fan profile by kind of moving one of these little sort of string things across. It's not probably not the most elegant, but in terms of visually identifying what's connected to what in terms of profiles and stuff, it's sort of somewhat visually appealing and a kind of unique way of doing it, if a little clunky. So we'll start over here on the left. So the temperature inputs, you've obviously got the cooler itself, and here it's pre-configured to link the temperature of the temperature going into the temperature sensor, which I believe is on the radiator. So that everything is basically linked to that as standard. Now with custom liquid cooling especially, and probably high-end liquid coolers as well, you generally want your fans, etc., to be responding to the coolant temperature, for the simple reason that it will take a few minutes for the water to warm up, because the water is absorbing a lot of the heat. So that means that there's a period where you generally don't need to ramp up your fans, because they will have zero effect on your component temperatures, in this case your processor. So that's one good thing about liquid cooling, is that you don't have to have the fan ramping up and down all the time like you would do with a heatsink. A heatsink is much more reliant on airflow going through it to actually cool your processor, and it needs that fan to ramp up very quickly. Not so with coolant, because the coolant has a much higher heat capacity. It can absorb a lot more heat before it starts to warm up. Therefore, your fans will have less of an effect early on, so you can actually afford, during random spikes in CPU temperature that last maybe sort of 10-20 seconds, you can actually afford to keep your fans at a similar a fairly low speed, and the coolant basically does all the work, and then gradually that heat will be dissipated out. So that's generally what you want to do here. Now, the only thing I have noticed is that the fact that the pumps are kind of linked to this temperature as well potentially means that the water block is not going to be running at its optimum or its maximum performance. So what I'm going to do for the testing later on is actually ramp the pump and the fans up to maximum speed for that test. So that's going to involve basically switching some of these things onto their maximum settings, and kind of stripping them out from the temperature input that we've got here, and manually setting them to full speed and seeing what difference that makes. So what this essentially means is that the cooler is going to be pretty quiet as standard. There won't be too much to worry about in terms of noise, and the pumps are very noisy at full speed as well. They kind of have this weird kind of double drone sound because there's two of them. So that's kind of how we're going to do the testing later. But the main things you need to know is that it's pretty configurable. You can basically link any components, be it fans or pumps, to pretty much any temperature input that you've got. So there are temperature inputs from the fans. Each fan has got a temperature input as well, a temperature sensor. You've got the coolant temperature in and the coolant temperature out on the pump. You can even connect it to a temperature sensor on your motherboard, like here we've got here. So, for example, if you wanted to point a fan at your VRMs, you could actually use the VRM temperature as your basically input for the fan speed. And even down here on our ASUS motherboard, we've actually got a water in and water out temperature potentially for a custom loop. That's not going to be much use in this situation, but you could potentially use it for some sort of scenario just as a temperature sensor. We've got the actual other temperature sensors here as well. So don't take too much notice of these because they're not connected to anything at the moment. So, but yeah, CPU package, obviously that's the motherboard CPU temperature, but the CPU temperature you actually want is the CPU temperature here, and that's basically one of these CPU package temperatures up here, or you could even connect it to the CPU core average. That's maybe what I would do, and that way if there are any kind of spikes on a particular core, it's not going to cause your whole system to go haywire just to try and cool one particular core, which it probably won't have any difference on that at all. So yeah, it's a pretty configurable bit of software. A little clunky in places, just when you have to kind of adjust these rope things to kind of go down to different components. For example, here we're going to switch the pumps to the balance profile, and you just kind of have to go down like that, and it's not done it there. I'm still not entirely sure how this thing works. I think you have to yeah, let's see if we can get it down to the balance profile like that. There you go. So you kind of have to, yeah, you sort of start at the beginning again, and then you drag that over to the component that you want to select it to, basically. So rather than pulling the end of the string and pulling it to another slot, you actually have to kind of go back to the actual component and then tie that to one of the profiles. So we've got it back on silent now. So you can obviously control each fan. We've got the different fans here, and the kind of weird thing is that the C fans down here, I think, are the actual processor cooling fans, so they're the fans on the radiator, would maybe have been more logical given the way that we've connected it up, which is to the manual, to actually have those as the A1 and A2 fans. So just be aware that you will need to be very careful which fans you're actually controlling in here, and you'll probably just need to listen out when they're just kind of manually force their speed up to kind of identify them, because I wouldn't rely on the A fans being connected to the radiator, because they're not in this case, and I've connected it up as per the book. So it's a very configurable set of stuff, and obviously if you want to tweak the actual performance profiles, you can just quickly switch between performance, balance and silent modes, and each one you can configure a fan speed in terms of percent. I would have probably liked to have seen an RPM speed here, but that would have added another layer of complexity and software that HYTE would have had to adapt with. But it's just things that I enjoy using in Gigabyte and ASUS software, for example. So yeah, you can fully configure these things on your own and do all that kind of stuff, and adjust the response time as well. So that's it for the cooling section. So the lighting, you have a couple of options. So we've got more to do with the different locations, which I'm going to try and pick at on the screen over here. So over on the right side, you can see the actual options that we have. So we have the light strip that we connected earlier, so that is connected, and that's connected while I was running the system, so the software automatically recognizes when you disconnect and reconnect components. We have the backlight, which is the backlight of the actual screen, I believe. And there is a whole bunch of LEDs on the back of that, and weirdly the LED strip has just disappeared. Oh, there, it's just come back again. Maybe it was just a bit of a software glitch. Yeah, so the backlight is on the back of the actual screen on top of your processor, and then we have the logo on top of the radiator as well. And all of these are individually configurable. So if you just select this, it will pick the red color for that, then you can select the logo and have a different color for that and all those kind of things. And obviously, I think we've selected static here, but you can do animate, you can do screen mirroring, a whole bunch of other stuff from your media, and you can select the brightness and all sorts of other things as well. So this will kind of be a just like a crazy rainbow show on the LEDs, kind of matching that. So that's pretty much it for the lighting. And if we have a quick look at the faces section, this is fairly straightforward. Whatever you see here in this animation here of the screen is what should be appearing on your actual physical screen. So if it isn't, you might need to update your software, or restart the program, or restart your PC if you're just installing for the first time. That's what I had to do to get it working properly. Just restart your system after you've installed everything, make sure the Windows updates are all okay, that there are no issues in Device Manager and that kind of stuff. So here I've got the CPU name at the top, the CPU temperature down the bottom. You can select from a whole load of funky backgrounds as well. You can choose a custom background. There's different lighting, and you can pick from your own media. And if you go, the foreground is obviously what's on the top side of the screen. So here you can just pick a standard clock. You could pick the weather as well. So almost like an iOS or Android sort of phone screen there as well. There are a couple of options like app focus, which is coming soon. So just watch out for the updates. And you can just select from different themes as well, and colors, opacity, performance. I kind of like, because I just like seeing what's actually going on with my system. And a couple of other options I've created here. So you've got the liquid temperature in. You might want to note, just be aware of how warm your liquid is. The coolant, liquid out as well is kind of interesting. And then we're just back to the clock there as well. So performance, to add another profile, you can just select from a whole bunch of stuff. You don't have to show your hardware name, but you can if you want to. And you can show the sensor name as well. Sensors, apparently fan speeds are coming soon as well, so that's another option that's not available at the moment. So temperature, liquid in, liquid out, and you can do CPU temperature, GPU temperature. You can do GPU frame rate. You can do something to do with your memory usage, storage. Motherboard is, I guess it's just a whole bunch of temperatures that you've got here. Yeah, so you can even get a real-time readout of your VRMs, and also the water temperature in, water temperature out as well. So that's directly fed off our motherboard temperature sensors. So with the Q60, again, we're just back to the different liquids and the sensors that we get with that kind of stuff. So it's pretty interesting. The software, for the most part, works absolutely fine. The only thing I had to do was to restart my PC after I installed it, and that was pretty much it. Other components, again, you can just add those in as and when you install them, such as the LED strips and that kind of stuff. It works pretty well. And yeah, some updates coming to the software hopefully fairly soon to add fan speed available on the screen as well. So that's pretty much it from the software. Okay, so we're finally looking at the cooling results now then, and there's something really important to realise in the differences between the HYTE THICC Q60 and lots of other liquid coolers out there. There's actually two things. Number one, we have software control here, so the software is controlling the fan speeds rather than your motherboard. So if you set a profile in your motherboard's EFI, for example, silent, balanced, or performance, generally what will happen is the fans and the pump will spin up to full speed at some point, usually when the CPU hits maybe 70, 80 degrees or something like that. Now, with the HYTE THICC Q60, we've got two different things going on. First of all, the software is controlling the fans. It still has profiles, but those profiles are going to be different to those of those that are in your motherboard's BIOS. Now, there's something even more important to realize, which is that the THICC Q60 is controlled essentially by the liquid temperature, the coolant temperature, and not your processor temperature. So that's actually a really good thing for coolers of this caliber, because in a liquid cooler or a custom liquid loop, you've essentially got two kind of cooling devices going on. You've got the heat from your processor being transferred into the coolant. The coolant then removes that heat and absorbs it. The coolant has a very high heat capacity, so it means that it can absorb a lot of heat before it starts warming up itself. So that's the first bit of the cooling. The second part is obviously that heat being transferred to the radiator and then expelled from the radiator by the fans. But the benefit of this really high heat capacity means that the coolant can absorb a lot of heat before you need to even spin up the fans. In fact, it's actually pointless spinning up fans as soon as your processor is under load with this kind of liquid cooler or custom liquid loop, because the fans will not be doing anything. So it's a great way of actually keeping your system very, very quiet for longer periods. So if you're loading your processor for 20, 30 seconds, maybe even a few minutes, generally you won't have to spin up the fans, which is a really, really good idea. So that's another thing that this cooler has that is very, very different to the other two coolers that we've included in the test. Both of those are controlled using our BIOS. Now, this does have a downside in that unless it's very, very finely calibrated, which most liquid coolers aren't, when the liquid temperature starts rising, you don't really know at what temperature your CPU is going to be at in that case. So what we found, or what I found with this testing, is that the HYTE radiator and all-in-one liquid cooler were basically seeing slightly higher temperatures on the CPU than the other liquid coolers at lower speeds. Now, if you go all out, you ramp up the fans and the pumps, it's pretty awesome. But because it's based on the liquid temperature and not the CPU temperature, it can sometimes have a bit of a delay in the cooling. Not that that's a bad thing, of course, because as I just mentioned, you have much, much lower noise levels, as we can see here in the graphs. So let's take a look at the graphs now then. And we have on the left, we have the temperature filter graphs, and on the right they are sorted by the noise level. So the noise level is not, completely accurate in terms of you being able to compare these results with MSI or Thermaltake or HYTE's own decibel readings. What they are is a sound meter that is placed in exactly the same distance away from the coolers. So what it is a good indicator of is which cooler in this particular test, in this testing scenario, which cooler is quieter or louder than another one. So we've got that basis to compare against. So on the left, we'll start with the temperature results. So at maximum speed, so this is every cooler that is at max speed is basically forced, it has its pumps and fans forced to full speed. So the Thermaltake, obviously this is a massive triple 140mm radiator, so it's absolutely enormous. 340mm fans on it. That managed a CPU temperature of 65 degrees C. So this is with multi-core enhancement disabled and current excursion protection disabled as well. So we're seeing some fairly lower temperatures here than you would if you just booted up and went straight into Windows without tweaking the BIOS at all. Even so, we do still see some much higher temperatures further on. But the key takeaway here is that the HYTE THICC Q60 managed to pretty much match that much, much larger Thermaltake radiator for both in terms of temperature. It was 1 degree warmer, and it was also 1 decibel louder. So yeah, decibels, they're not linear, but to the human ear, the difference between 54 dBA and 55 is very, very small. So that's a really, really good result for HYTE, because it means that this tiny, well, I say tiny, it's very, very thick, but it's still a 240mm all-in-one liquid cooler. It kept up with an absolutely enormous, monstrous 420mm liquid cooler. So that's a really good result. Now, going down the graph, as we kind of suspected, we start seeing some much higher temperatures for the HYTE THICC Q60. And reasons for that we spoke about a minute ago. The HYTE is responding to the coolant temperature and not the processor temperature. So the result is exactly what I said earlier, that we're getting much, much lower noise levels. So for example, with the HYTE in its performance mode, where it's able to ramp up, it's still very, very quiet. It's at 42 dBA, and the MSI Core Liquid, even on its silent mode, was at 46 dBA, and the Thermaltake with the silent mode set in our BIOS was at 43 dBA. So both of those coolers louder than the HYTE. Now, the HYTE temperature in its performance mode was 77 degrees. So that was warmer than the other two coolers and much warmer than the Thermaltake, which was just 1 decibel louder. So that's quite a big gulf, and part of the reason for that is because in the performance mode, everything is kind of knocked back quite a lot. Now with all-in-one liquid coolers, usually what happens is eventually they will ramp up to full speed. Now the HYTE will ramp up to full speed, but nowhere near as quickly. So because it's based on the coolant temperature, so it's much quieter, but you do see slightly higher thermals. Now it's really easy for you to basically get similar performance to the other coolers. You could just switch to a CPU response curve instead of the coolant response curve, and you will basically get similar performance, if not better performance, in this scenario. But again, we're probably seeing here the downsides of having a very thick radiator and slow spinning fans, because the fans were very, very quiet. And that is amplified right at the bottom of the graph. We've got the Q60 with its fans just ticking away, and this thing was silent at this setting. It was completely silent, but we did see the temperature, the CPU temperature, rise up to 90 degrees as a result. So the pumps inaudible, the fans just ticking over. You can feel a gentle airflow through the radiator, but because that radiator is so thick, those fans do start to struggle at very low RPMs, even if it is absolutely silent. So if we flip that around and look at the right hand graph now, then we've got the basically the lower dBAs at the top of the graph and the higher dBAs at the bottom of the graph. So better noise results at the top. And as we can see, the HYTE occupies the top two slots because it has the two lowest dBA ratings in silent mode and performance mode. And at max speed, it was pretty loud, I have to admit. It was a very, very loud cooler, but not that much louder, if at all, to my ear. I couldn't actually just notice a difference between it and the Thermaltake TH420 V2 ALGB cooler at its full speed as well. So that's just what you have to kind of live with a smaller radiator. You're going to have to shove more air through it to get similar performance to larger coolers, and with this, in this situation, you're going to have to pump even more airflow through it, which is why you have to have those really, really thick fans. So now we have an extra test here, which is looking at the results from a multi-core enhancement point of view. So multi-core enhancement is an option in some BIOSes where you can force all of the processor cores to run at the same speed in multi-threaded workloads. So in ASUS motherboards, this is called multi-core enhancement, literally that phrase, and you can enable it or disable it fairly easily. Enabling it does result in more performance in some applications, but it does result in a whole load extra heat being dumped into your processor and your cooler as a result. So the Core i7 14700K, not a particularly cool customer. It's pretty toasty, in fact, even at stock speed, but if you enable this, then you'll see temperatures generally about 15-20 degrees higher than what we were looking at earlier. So maximum speed, the HYTE THICC Q60 managed 85 degrees C in this situation, and that actually matched the Thermaltake TH420 V2 cooler. Again, that Thermaltake cooler managing to knock 1 decibel off that result, but this is a great result for HYTE here, because even though the radiator was tiny in comparison to the massive triple 140mm radiator on the Thermaltake, it still managed to match it in the cooling stakes here, and massively outstripping the MSI MAG Core Liquid E240. Now, over on the right-hand side, we've got the same data, but just filtered by noise level. And again, we can see the MSI cooler doing really well in terms of noise, but that noise comes at an expense of airflow and cooling capacity, and just really struggling here with this high-end CPU with multi-core enhancement enabled. The other two coolers, though, obviously the Thermaltake coming second in terms of noise, but to be honest, 1 decibel difference to the human ear is very, very, very small indeed. So pretty much zero difference between the massive Thermaltake cooler and the much more compact HYTE THICC Q60. So what do we make of the HYTE THICC Q60 then? Well, this thing is absolutely ridiculous. It managed to keep up with a much larger 420mm or triple 140mm fan radiator liquid cooler, which really says something about its performance. The software generally worked very, very well. It's very customizable. It's configured to ramp up the fans and the pumps according to the coolant temperature out of the box. But as I mentioned earlier, that is actually a really good way of configuring these things, even if it might mean slightly higher CPU temperatures. But you can always switch back to CPU temperature control in the software because it's very, very configurable and pretty easy to use as well. The screen is a great addition. Personally, I would prefer if they maybe knock the screen off and chops £100 or $100 off the price as well. I think that would make it a lot more appealing to enthusiasts, but obviously HYTE is gunning for the top end, and it obviously has the Y70 touch case as well that looks fantastic. And in some of those more kind of cube style cases, a smaller radiator does kind of make sense. This thing fitted in really, really well in both the Y70 and Y60 cases that I used in testing. Obviously the Y60 you saw earlier in this video. So for me, I think it definitely has that niche where if you have a fairly compact case like that, or just a standard tower that can't fit larger radiators, or you're going to struggle to fit those larger radiators in, this could be a very, very good option. Now, the price is still a sticking point, even given how amazing the cooling was compared to larger radiators. The larger cooler that we actually included today costs a heck of a lot less than this thing as well. So in terms of a bang for your buck, it definitely doesn't score highly. So $300 is a heck of a lot to spend on a liquid cooler. You can probably get custom liquid cooling loops for the same money that perform similarly. But obviously you're getting everything here. You're getting a ready-made unit. You're getting the Nexus ecosystem, which, as you saw earlier, performs brilliantly in terms of connecting cables to connect other fans, RGB lighting, and the software and all that kind of stuff. Now, personally, I love seeing these things come onto the market. They're just thinking outside the box. They're very different. They're probably quite niche, as this thing is as well. So for me, I absolutely love it. The price is still a sticking point though, as is what case you're actually going to be using it in. You'll have to make that decision for yourself. But if it suits your particular setup, I can thoroughly recommend it. There are obviously other options that you might want to consider out there as well. So thank you to HYTE for sending this over today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and obviously let me know what you think in the comments down below. Love hearing what you guys think of these products and my videos in general. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe as well. If you found this video informative today, you can even buy me a coffee in the description down below as well. The description is where you will find all the buy links for products that we've used today in today's video, including the HYTE THICC Q60. And don't forget to check out my Amazon shop, where you can check out all the products that I have tested thoroughly on this channel, and you know that they're going to perform well if you buy them as well. So that's it from me today. Thanks again to HYTE for sending it over. Thanks to you guys for watching, and I will catch you soon.